So like Venerable Kunga, I recently passed a milestone. In September, I turned 65. That means that I'm officially a senior citizen now. I qualify for Medicare, and I'm eligible for Social Security and senior discounts. And I guess that makes me a senior nun. Is that right, Venerable? I am senior, and I am a nun. Okay, just checking. In her recent talk about how to cultivate a healthier sense of self, Venerable was talking about identities and how at different stages of our life we cling to identities. And I was happy to see and got some feedback about when I arrived at the Abbey almost 8 years ago, I had different identities than I have now. And I let go of a few of them and still clinging to some of them. But some of our identities change as we age. And so I've noticed that as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm noticing that there is kind of a grandmotherly feeling coming up. It's interesting. I never had kids, but I have noticed this. And, like you said you feel like you're still 21. When I think about my age, I feel like I'm about 40. That was when I ordained. I wonder if it has something to do with that. Some clock stops then, and you wear a uniform and cut your hair the same way every year. But I notice that sometimes I do think of myself as 40, especially when I'm out in the woods. But sometimes, like when I'm carrying a heavy chair, I feel like I'm 65, and I don't want someone younger just to open the door. I want them to take the chair. Got it? So I was reflecting on the International Bhikshuni or International Nuns Varsa that I attended earlier this summer, and I would say about 60%, 70% of the nuns were in their 20s or 30s. And so there was a lot of youth around. And I think that also brought out this sense of motherliness, or you too, you had that experience, yeah. I felt very protective of them, I just wanted the best for them and felt a lot of compassion coming up. So I was a little bit surprised when I had a note on my table one day from a young Vietnamese nun, and she said something like, you seem so compassionate and so self-confident as a nun. Can you tell me what I need to practice to be like you? And I was a little taken aback by that. But as I thought about what I might say to her when we finally got together, I found some things coming out of my mouth that I have certainly learned here, many things from you, Venerable, but also some things that I've picked up from other sources. And so I shared with her a few points that have a lot of meaning for me. And the first one is that it's important to be mindful of the basic values and precepts that we want to live by. That seems so obvious, and yet how many of us have actually stopped in our lives to write them down, to articulate them, to be very clear about what it is that we value and how we want to live our lives. That action of writing them down on a piece of paper and then reviewing them periodically is so helpful. And of course, as Buddhist, a big part of our value system from the Buddhist worldview is ethics. And so that's why one of the reasons that we hold precepts. So living ethically really means having the strong intention not to harm and to benefit. Again, it seems like very common sense, right? But when we look at the automatic way we live our lives and the things that come out of our mouths, sometimes you wonder how committed we are to that value. And so it's good to, as we do here at the Abbey, we remind ourselves every day, today as much as possible, may I not harm myself or others with my body, speech, and mind. May I benefit others. I find that so helpful. The repetition, we need repetition because the habits for all of us are so strong. So living ethically means aspiring not to harm others and instead of benefiting them as much as we can. And that's not so easy. That's a whole life work. And for those of us who've already taken precepts, we're encouraged to be mindful, stay mindful of those precepts. So that's one activity, or that's one way of thinking of mindfulness. Usually we think of mindfulness as sitting still and watching our breath, but actually staying mindful throughout the day is equally or even more important, that we take what we know from the cushion into our daily life. And also introspective awareness to then check up throughout the day. Again, those are things that we have to cultivate. They're not just, we might think, well, that, of course that makes sense, but do we do it? This is something to look at. And staying aware of our values and precepts inspires us, I think, to live with genuine integrity and consideration for others. So here, integrity really means avoiding misconduct or avoiding negative actions due to our own self-respect and our own sense of self and self-consciousness. Really not wanting to create problems for ourselves, really making the connection between our actions and the experiences that we bring into our lives. And then consideration for others is really observing or wanting to be aware of the impact that our actions have on others, because we do impact each other so much. And avoiding negativity so that we don't, especially so as Buddhists, so that we don't cause someone else to lose faith in the Dharma. And it's so obvious, too, that when we're involved with afflictions and negative actions, we dislike ourselves. It's true, isn't it? We feel bad about ourselves. So, hey, let's put the dots together, connect them. And this is an inspiration for us to really make ethical conduct and the other values that we highlight in our lives first and foremost in our mind. And if we're clear about our basic values and precepts, and we guard them with mindfulness and introspective awareness, as well as integrity and consideration for others, then we will naturally appreciate and feel good about ourselves. It brings about happiness. And self-confidence as well, right? When we're able to live according to the values that we have highlighted. So knowing our basic values and precepts really helps us to identify and temporary as well as long-term goals and priorities for how we're going to use our life energy, our resources, our valuable time. So that was the first thing that I just shared with her. And I appreciate so much how you've articulated that again and again so clearly, Venerable. And then the second thing that came to my mind was to encourage her to be aware of her own strengths and weaknesses. And it has surprised me over the years that when you ask people, could you list 8 or 10 good qualities that you appreciate about yourself? Most people have difficulty with that. They feel embarrassed or shy or somehow put on the spot. But when we know our own good qualities, not with arrogance, not with pride or conceit, but just simply recognizing something about ourselves that we appreciate, that also can contribute to this sense of self-confidence, can it? Because that also will tie into our basic values and the precepts that we want to live by. Also, being aware of our own limitations can equally be helpful, because when we are honest with ourselves about where our shortcomings are, what are the non-virtues or the negative states of mind that we have difficulties with, then we're more likely to be on guard and watching for them as they arise throughout the day. Also, when we have this basic awareness of strengths and weaknesses, then that leads to a kind of self-acceptance about ourselves. We know those things about ourselves, so that if someone else comments on them, especially if they're pointing something out or being a little critical or judgmental, then we're already aware of what we're working on, what qualities we carry, what limitations we currently have, and what we're working on, so that we're not so thrown off if someone should point out a fault or a judgment about something. And then the last thing that I shared with her is to be really clear about what you're actively working on, how you're working to increase the good qualities in your own life, and how you're working, what it is you want to do to address the shortcomings that you have. Again, this can help us to develop understanding about, or it encourages us to, develop understanding about where these things come from. What's really underlying the fear that we have or the aggression that we have, really trying to find out what's the foundation, what are the vulnerabilities behind that, what are the needs, the feelings, however we want to define that, what's underneath it. And the more we do that, the more we really investigate ourselves and know ourselves, again, that adds to this acceptance and really a sense of solidness, being able to stay in our own place, whether someone praises us or someone criticizes us. And really examining our mind, learning from our own mistakes and transgressions. Like, we will make mistakes, even if we hold precepts. We are bound to make mistakes because we all have afflictions. But the real beauty in that, the real opportunity and beauty is to ask ourselves, what can I learn about myself given what were the conditions that led to this? What was happening in myself? What was I feeling? What was I needing? What are some of the conditioning that I've grown up with that could have contributed to that? So the more we understand about ourselves, that helps to, actually, the more we know about our own mind, the more we know about every other sentient being, because basically we're all hardwired very similarly. So these are just a few of the points that I shared with this young nun, and I don't know what she took away from it, but I shared these with Tenzin the other day, and he seemed to appreciate them and get something out of them too. I think there's a lot there to work with. I mean, these are kind of like a blueprint for our ethical life, especially as Buddhists. So, thank you.